Hi, my name is Sucia Ramadianti,
My name is Alvira.
My name is Hafiza Dwi.
and today we're going to talk about The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Alright, so let's start with what The Haunting of Hill House is all about.
Alright, let me explain. The Haunting of Hill House is a novel which was published in 1959, and recently, in 2018, the novel is adapted into a Netflix series. However, there are differences between the novel and the series itself. Anyway, the novel follows four strangers under the guidance of Dr. Mantaj, who is hoping to scientifically prove the existence of supernatural. Over the course of the summer, the house proved itself to be haunted, to be extremely haunted. It is terrifying on a supernatural and psychological level, and it is an absolute must-read to anyone who obsessed with horror.
I also want to add another thing. I believe one of the reasons why this novel is very haunting is because Shirley decided to add a bit of psychological and paranormal mix within the story. And I believe this is what Stephen King's meant when he talks about fictions and supernatural coming together to understand our own fears. And I believe Shirley Jackson's fascination with the supernatural and dying definitely played a huge influence in the story of Hill House. As Ruth Franklin writes in her biography, A Rather Haunted Life, she said witchcraft was important to Jackson for what it symbolized female strength and potency. And to call oneself a witch then is to claim some of the power.
Besides, I think it didn't matter what anyone else thought of witchcraft or Jackson's claim of being a witch. It gave her a degree of power otherwise not offered to her. Jackson has a lifelong interest in the occult, who dabbled in spells and liked to tell reporters that she was a witch, proposed to believe in ghosts.
Exactly, and that's what we are going to talk to today in this video. We are going to analyze The Haunting of the House by Shirley Jackson using autobiographical theory because we see that there are a lot of resemblance between the life of the author and also the novel itself. Autobiographical itself is one type of biography which tells a life story of the author, but instead of being written by somebody else, it is written by the person's own pen in his own word. In writing about personal experience, one discovers himself. Therefore, it is not merely a collection of anecdotes, but instead it is a revelation to the readers about author's self-discovery. So here we're going to make a link between Shirley Jackson's life and how it influences the storyline of The Haunting of the House.
In the story, Shirley Jackson captures our most primitive impulse, which are fear and desire, and releases them into the house. Shirley Jackson's biographical influence is clearly written on the walls of the Hill House. And because of this disturbance in her personal life, she created a house that becomes an entity all its own. The book resonated with the reader because of the tension it created by playing with the notion of the dead and the idea of dying alone. The book also conjures up with disturbing images of incest and non-clan reference and signals of homosexual behavior. Much like our protagonist, Eleanor Fence, the house is complicated and distinctive figure in the novel, and it toys with our fear and anxiety over death, loneliness, and sex. Further, we delve into the story. So, in what way do you think Shirley creates this notion of fear and death?
I think it's very clear. It all began with the Hill House itself. I mean, let's start by the first chapter of the book. The very first page, chapter 1 in The Haunting of Hill House, described the house as an almost living structure, as it having a soul. No life organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Hill House, not seen, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone. This idea of the house being alive brings up the fact that there is something more after death, and it takes our fear of death and it removed by this idea that we can live past our mortal bodies. And if the house accepts us, then it is eternal, and death will never come, as long as we remain one with the house. And I believe this is why people flock to religion as a way of coping with death. We strive to know more about what comes after life, and if there is anything past our mortal bodies. I believed this is the fascination with hauntings, especially in this novel, with the doctor's obsession with the paranormal. And Shirley Jackson is very obviously also obsessed with the unknown since she was known to dabble in the occult. And this fixation with death is what makes the book is so fascinating.
Resonates with what people refer to as the writing style of Shirley Jackson. People often say that Miss Jackson writes not with a pen, but instead with a broomstick. This quip sheds a lot of light behind the woman who share ghost stories. Not only did her fiction draw upon the supernatural, but so did her beliefs in real life too. After discovering Sir James George Fraser's The Golden Bough in college and writing about witchcraft at the University of Rochester in her late teens, Jackson became more than just a little interested in occult and began actually studying it. Jackson also rumored to have often practiced a witchcraft, which then caused her publisher named Alfred to break his leg in an accident. And from her late teens throughout the rest of her life, Jackson believed in witchcraft and even read tarot cards. Now do you see where she gets her spooky side from?
Yeah.
Jackson's inspiration to write the novel also came after reading a group of 19th century psychic researchers who rented a house they believed to be haunted in order to study paranormal phenomena. The researchers would record their experiences in the house and presented them in the form of a treatise to the Society for Psychic. In her essay, Experience and Fiction, Jackson explained she was most interested with the way the researchers revealed their own personalities and backgrounds throughout the study. They thought they were being terribly scientific and proving all kinds of things, she explained, and yet the story that kept coming through their dry reports was not at all the story of a haunted house. It was a story with several earnest, I believe misguided, certainly determined people with their differing motivations and backgrounds.
Another interesting about this story is that how we can see the relationship between the characters, especially Eleanor and her mother, mirrors Jackson's own relationship with her mother. The Haunting of Hill House brings up the idea of repressed memories. This house brings back all these memories for Eleanor and the time that she took care of her mother. The house in a way becomes a mother in a sense because it's constantly calling her to come home. Eleanor is the lost, scared child longing to return to the warmth. Shirley Jackson's own strained relationship with her mother, Geraldine, can be looked at as well. This fear and anxiety of not living up to her mother's standard is mirrored through the stressed relationship between Eleanor and her mother.
I think it is important that you mention what you meant by the strained relationship between Shirley Jackson and her mother.
When she was a young child to her dad, she outlived both of her parents. Shirley Jackson was at odds at her mother. Whether her mom disagreed with the way that she dressed and combed her hair, her interested in occult and interested in communism, her choices in career, and eventually her husband. Jackson's mother, Geraldine, would spend most of her daughter's life criticizing her. despite her high level on literary success.
Yeah, I read that when her novel titled After We Have Always Lived in the Castle, it received praise as managing the ironic miracle of convincing the reader that a house inhabited by a lunatic, a poisoner, and a pyromaniac is a world more rich in sympathy, love, and subtlety than the real world. Instead of congratulating her daughter's success, she criticized Jackson's appearance in accompanying photo, stating, "If you don't care what you look like or care about your appearance, why don't you do something about it for your children's sake, for your husband's sake? I have been so sad all morning about what you have allowed yourself to look like." And you thought your mother was bad?
The novel also takes a detour from the paranormal for a bit and deals with some sexual issues, such as homosexual innuendos between Theodora and Eleanor. We have to remember that The Haunting of Hill House was written in the late 1950s. It was a time when America is still dealing with issues like sexuality and race. We are never truly certain of Theodora and Eleanor's sexuality in the novel. We are given two characters who are both single and without children, and that in itself was frowned upon in the 1950s. "Are you married?" Eleanor asked. There was a little silence, then the Theodore laughed quickly and said no. But when Theodore mentions that she has a roommate with whom she had a quarrel with, we are left with this assumption that maybe it was a love quarrel and perhaps she is a lesbian. Then this sort of flirtatious banter between Theodore, Eleanor, and Luke only furthers our suspicions of Theodore's sexuality.
Yeah, that's right. It makes us questioning about her sexuality, whether she is a lesbian or she is a bisexual, maybe neither. This frightful moment that Eleanor and Theodora experience together, especially in the bedroom, bring us two closer. Especially when in the bedroom, such as when they are huddling for warmth on the bed. It is later in the story that the two begin to quarrel about mundane things. A lover's quarrel, perhaps. Could this be because Eleanor is finding herself falling for Theodora? Eleanor seems very naive, and perhaps she is afraid of this desire that she feels because she is not used to having a relationship. The feeling for Theodora could be causing Eleanor to go mad. We are never really certain, but it is logical given the time period and how homosexuality was viewed as a defiant act that it will cause almost this hysteria.
We must wonder if the idea of being lesbian appealed to Shirley Jackson subconsciously, considering her rocky marriage to Stanley Hyman, whom she suspected of being unfaithful. And I believe this fear of being alone played a major part in Shirley Jackson's real life, and it played a huge part in the character she created in Eleanor. And the fear of loneliness and dying alone is a fear many people have. And it's obvious that Shirley Jackson was not immune to loneliness. When Eleanor experiences holding a hand with Theodora, she freaks out, saying, "Good God, whose hand was I holding?" And is this incident paranormal, or is it a desire to be intimate with Theo? This concern of not knowing whose hand you are holding could mean several things. It could be personal, taken straight from the pages of Shirley Jackson's marriage to Stanley, or a fear of this homosexual desire for Theodora.
God, it knows I'm here.
As it has been stated before that this novel already developed into 3 films. The first one is The Haunting in 1963. Julie Harris plays as Eleanor, and Clay Bloom plays as Theodora, while Richard Johnson plays as Dr. John Marquay, the doctor who held an experiment, but it is a different name as in novel. And Russ Tomlin plays as Luke.
Assisting me in this exploration of the unknown was Eleanor, Nell, who could look back into the past, and Theo, something of a witch who could see into the future. This is Luke, who didn't believe in anything. until evil, patient and waiting, made him change his mind.
Stop it! God. Is this where you're going?
That's Hill House. It's perfect, isn't it?
The second adaptation is in 1999. It is a remake of the British psychological horror film of the same name. This film stars Liam Neeson as Dr. David Marrow, Catherine Zeta-Jones as Theodora, Owen Wilson as Luke, and Lily Taylor as Eleanor. This movie adapting the original storyline of the novel with only the Doctor has
To
different
observe the
names.
dynamics of fear. You don't tell the rats. They're actually in a maze.
I just think Dr. Marrow's up to something.
Now I want you two to get good rest.
What if I have a bad dream?
Well, I'm sure we can handle any dream you have.
What if I dream that you sent us away into the dark and we get hurt? Really hurt?
The last one is The Haunting of a Hill House series. It is an American supernatural horror web television series created and directed by Mike Flanagan for Netflix. The series is a reimagining of the 1959 novel of the same name by Shirley Jackson. Otherwise, this novel adaptation is a bit different from two other adaptations before. The concept of family matter is very fascinating. Also, there is a character development. Instead of the film tell a story of a doctor doing experiment with three strangers in a haunted house, the story tells about the Crane family. In the novel, Crane family was the owner of Hill House. There are Hugh Crane played by Timothy Hutton, Olivia Crane played by Carla Gugino, Shirley Crane played by Elizabeth Reeser, Stephen Crane played by Michelle Huseman, Theodora Crane played by Kate Siegel, Eleanor Crane played by Victoria Pedetri, and the last one, Luke Crane played by Oliver Jackson Cohen.
Because of where we grew up.
Do you see the interesting part here? Yes, there is a character named Shirley as it is for Shirley Jackson. Shirley is the second oldest children out of 5 current legacy. Shirley is decisive, systematic, organized, and assertive. This character in this film kind of has similarity with Jackson herself. In the series adaptation, Shirley Crane has a guilt of seeing someone else when she is already married. This, in quote, rocky marriage that Shirley Crane portrayed in the series kind of has the same issue with what Jackson had. Another interesting fact is that Stephen Crane is a development character that the name is taken from Stephen King, the famous horror author of It, The Shining, and Pet Sematary. The character Stephen Crane, he is a writer who has gotten fame from a book he wrote about Hill House and their experiences. While still the character Eleanor is the main character that has a very fragile soul, she is connected with the house and her mother. This long series overarching message insists that we are never truly free from the traumas endured in childhood, that these experiences leave a lasting and potentially harmful impression well into adulthood, scrambling up our ability to interact with people in general. This message has the same one in the book as Eleanor cannot recover from her childhood traumas as well.
Don't worry now, sweetie. That really bad dream? Of course I'd wake you.
Conclusion. First, the novel reveals how she has personal beliefs of witchcrafts and how she also learned about spells, which makes her a great author of ghost stories. Second, it also reveals the bitter relationship between Jackson and her mother, which then mirrors in the relationship between Eleanor and her mother, which is the opposite of what Jackson had throughout her life. Third, the story addresses some sexuality issues between Theodore and Eleanor, and it relates with the rocky marriage that Jackson's had with her husband, Hyman, resulting in the similarity of Jackson's questioning about her sexuality, which is the same as Eleanor, the character.
So that's all for today's discussion. Don't forget to like and comment down below if you already watched The Haunting of Hill House in the Netflix or you already read the novel.